Damn, this obby looks pretty difficult. I'm gonna see if I can do it. Oh. No! Yes! I did it. Oh, it looks like I got a badge for it too. Yeah, boy. I did the obby. I can now flex to my friends about this. Nah, I am not doing that. Do you see how long that goes? I am done here. I can't believe this. Alright, let's think about what we just saw for a minute. When I finished this obby, now this was a very difficult obby, I will admit that. Once I ended up finishing this obby, then I touched this part, and when I touched this part, it showed this little notification down here in the bottom right of my screen showing that I got a new badge. Now, if you're unfamiliar with badges, essentially, they are achievements that you can obtain in a Roblox game if the developer decides to add them. And when you obtain these badges, they can appear on your profile to show that you have earned these badges within a specific game on Roblox. So that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do inside of this video. I'm going to be showing you the scripting aspect of implementing these badges in your Roblox game. So with that being said, let's go straight into implementing badges inside of Roblox Studio. Now that we understand it, let's start implementing badges in our Roblox game. But before we can do that, we need to make sure that we are in Roblox Studio on a published game. So we can't be working on this on a local file because badges can only be created on a published Roblox game. And if you don't remember how to do that, we basically just go to the top left, hit File, and then we hit Publish to Roblox As, and then if you need to create a new place or overwrite an already existing one, then you can do that. But I'm already in a published place, so I don't need to do that. So once you have that taken care of, next what we're going to do is start creating our badges for our game. One place that we can create these badges is within our game settings. So if we go to Home and then click on Game Settings, if we go down to Monetization, then there should be a Badges section inside of here. Ignore this badge that's over here, but basically, we can create a new badge clicking this create button next to the badge's text. So if we click on this, then what should happen is that we should be redirected to our creator dashboard. But in order to create our badges, we need to locate our game inside of our creator dashboard. So in this case, my game is called Data Store Test 1. So in order to create a badge, we need to click on the three dots that are on the top right, and then click on Create Badge. So now we're on this creating a badge page where we can upload an image for a badge, we can make a name for it, and a description. Now, if we are creating a badge, we need an image, and we also need a name for it. The description is optional, and there is a note down here saying that the first 5 badges that are created are free. But afterwards, you have to pay 100 Robux for any additional badges if you decide to create more than 5 badges in your game. But for the first 5, luckily, they're free to add. So you can add whatever image you want as long as the format is correct with one of these 4. It doesn't really matter what you do in this case, so I'm just going to pick this one. And then we can change the name of it to let's say, Test Badge 1. And then you can add in a description as well. We could just say something like, this is the Test Badge 1. Okay, so now that we have all this information filled out, let's hit Create Badge. So what should happen is within our badges section in our game, our badge has been uploaded, but our image is currently being under moderation right now. So now that we have our badge, we can go back into Roblox Studio and we can hit the refresh button to see our badge displayed on our badges category. So we have our badge here, and that is how you create badges in Roblox Studio. Now that we have the badge, let's start scripting it. And the first thing we're going to do is award this badge to the player if they all of a sudden decide to start joining into the game. We're going to be doing that by inserting a script inside of server script service. So let's hit the plus sign, let's insert a script. Now inside of our script, we're going to need access to the badge service that will allow us to award our badge to the player. So we're going to make reference to badge service by saying local badge service equals game:get service badge service. Now here's something important to know about. How do we know which badge we're trying to give to the player? So whenever we're creating badges, whenever we're working with badges, in order to know which badge is associated with what, we have to refer to its badge ID. And if you want to know where the badge ID of our newly created badge is, we're going to go back to our game, hit game settings, go to monetization, and with our badge, we're going to hit the 3 dots that are to the right of it, and we're going to click this button that says copy ID to clipboard. So if you remember how assets work in Roblox, basically the way you distinguish one asset from another one is by its asset ID. But for badges, they have their own set of IDs independent from other assets on Roblox. So it basically works the same way here. So we're just going to hit copy ID to clipboard. We're going to close out of this and then go back to our script. So let's make a variable to know that this is going to be our badge ID. So we're going to say local badge ID equals, and then right click, paste. So this is our badge ID right here. And it's this very big number right here. But now that we have our badge ID, let's make it so that we can award this badge to the player when they join into the game for the first time. So what we're going to do is drop 2 lines and then make a player added event. So we're going to say game.players.playerAdded connect function, open close parentheses, passing in the player argument. And so now we're going to immediately award the badge to the player since they joined into the game. So we're going to say badge service award. And this function takes in 2 arguments. So the first one is going to be the user ID, and the second one is going to be the badge ID, which we've displayed up here in this variable. So the first argument is going to be the player.user ID, and then the second one's going to be the badge ID. So this is a very basic implementation of awarding badges to the player when they join into the game. Let's also add a task.wait before awarding the badge, just so that we can give the server enough time for the player to join into the game so that we can see our badge being awarded on the bottom right. So let's now join into the game and see our result. All right, so I'm in the game, and after about a few seconds, it should display right there saying that I have been awarded the test badge 1. Because we joined into the game and we told badge service to award the badge to our player. So that is basically how you award badges to the player in the most bare bone basic way. So since we've been awarded the badge, we now have it. But according to our script, if we join back into the game, then Roblox will still attempt to give the badge to our player despite us having the badge already. We obviously don't want this to happen if we've already obtained the badge. So what we need to do is make a check to see if the player already has the badge. And what we're going to do is use a function that Roblox has provided for us called userHasBadgeAsync. So the way this is going to work is we're basically going to write a variable by saying local hasBadge equals, and then what we're going to do is say badge service userHasBadgeAsync. And this also takes in 2 arguments that are basically the same as down here. The first one is going to be the user ID, and the second one is going to be the badge ID. So we're going to say player.useUserID and then badge ID. So this is going to return a Boolean to check whether the player has the badge or not. And if the player does have the badge, then we don't need to award the player. But if they don't, then we should award the badge to the player. So we're going to say if not has badge, so if the player does not have the badge, then we're going to award the badge to the player. But let's say if we don't, but let's say if the player already does, then we can just print out saying player.name, and then we can say already has the test badge. And so this is basically how our script is looking now when it comes to checking whether the player has the badge or not. So let's go and hit play again. So now what should happen is we already have the badge. So on the output, it should say that the player already has the test badge, as you can see down here. It's not going to award it to us because we already have it. So there's another thing we can do with badges, and that's obtaining information about a specific badge if we need it in our Roblox game. So right now I'm back in the Creator Hub and I'm checking the overview of the badge that we just created. So we have things like our name, the image, the description, and whether you can obtain this badge or not. With these 4 bits of information, we can actually retrieve this information in Roblox Studio if we need it within the game specifically. So with what I'm about to show you, we're able to access the name of the badge, the description of the badge, whether you can obtain it or not, and the ID of the image. So not the ID of the badge, but the ID of the image for the badge. So with that being said, let's go back into Studio and implement this. So now that we're here, we're going to use a method that will give us a table full of the information that we need called get badge info async. So this is what it's going to look like. We're going to make another variable by saying local badge info equals badge service colon get badge info async, and the only argument that this needs is the badge ID, which we already have as a variable. So we're going to say badge ID, and this is going to return a table full of information that we're going to use inside of Roblox Studio. So if we, let's say, decided to loop through all the values inside of our badge info variable, so let's just do this really quick by putting in badge info, do, and then print v. If we just go into the game and if we just go into the game and see the output, what should be down there is, okay, so we have true, and then this massive number, and then we have the name of our badge, and then we have the description of the badge. So you can kind of get what sort of information's in here because I explained this earlier. We have the badge name, we have the badge description, we have whether this is active or not, and we have the ID of the image itself. So if we want to be more specific about getting which information, we can use the properties that badge info has just by saying print badge info dot name. So that is basically fetching the name of the badge, and then we have badge info dot description, which gives us the description obviously, and then we have badge info dot is enabled, which is the third property that tells us whether you can actually obtain this badge, and then finally the last one is called icon image ID. So these are the four properties that badge info has for us to use in a Roblox game in case we do need this information from the badge itself. So that is another neat thing we can do with these badges in our game. Okay, so we basically went over everything badge service has to offer, but if I'm gonna be honest, we did a pretty sloppy job with adding all of these different features that badge service has to offer. It works, but it is pretty unsecure with the way we've been trying to implement these features in Roblox Studio. So what we're going to do is add pcalls to our scripts. So if you've been following along with my advanced scripting series, you might be familiar with pcalls because I explained how to use them when we're working with data stores. And the same principle basically applies here with badge service because we're using functions that could be interrupted by the network when we're trying to do something. And there is a very high possibility that it might not go through with what we're trying to do, whether that be trying to figure out whether the player has a badge, or whether we were able to award the badge properly, or whether we were able to get information about a badge specifically. If we aren't certain about whether this is going to go through or not, we need to know why it doesn't go through. So that's why we need to use pcalls. But here's another thing. I haven't really explained the syntax of pcalls and the different ways you can write pcalls when using this. You still might be confused about why a pcall is structured the way it is. So there's two ways of writing pcalls, and the reason I'm explaining this is because we're going to be using the second way of writing pcalls that I haven't showed you yet. So before we implement that, I want to show you how this works. So there's two ways of writing pcalls, and I've showed you how to do the first one if you've been following my advanced scripting tutorial series, because I did this when I was teaching you how to do data stores. But it looks something along the lines of this. So if I have our success variable like this with our error message right here, this is basically going to tell us that if the pcall failed, then we're going to print this message, but if it was successful, then we're going to know with this Boolean value. We're going to set this equal to pcall function open and close parentheses enter. So this has been the structure of our pcall, but now you might think, why is it like this? What's the significance of this syntax structure? So I kind of want you to think of it like this. If I, let's say, deleted these lines that are empty right here, this is how you define a function. So you have the function keyword with the open and close parentheses, and then you end it with an end statement. And then between here is the body of code. So this is how you create a new function. And this is basically one argument in this pcall. But then everything up until this point is any external argument that's going to be passed into these parameters that are inside of this function that you just created. What I'm talking about is, let's say I had a parameter in here called number1. If I wanted to pass in a number that associates with this parameter right here, I'm going to pass it in after this function call right here. So this can be whatever number I want. It can be 100. So the first argument is going to be the function. The second one is going to be any associated arguments that are going to be passed into these parameters right here. And so if I basically drop a line down here with the function, this is basically what we had before with our pcall, but this time we're adding in a parameter with an argument associated with it. And this is how you structure the first pcall. So if I, let's say, printed number 1, then what's going to happen is if I hit run inside of Roblox, then in the output, it should print the number 100 because we were successfully able to know whether we were able to have this go through successfully or not. And so this is one way of structuring pcalls, and I hope that made sense to you. Okay, but now I'm going to show you the second way of writing a pcall. So this one takes in 2 required functions on top of any additional arguments that you want to put. So for our first example, we only put in 1 required argument, which was our function that we just created. But this time, if we, let's say, wanted to use a method from a specific class that Roblox has to offer, which in this case, we're going to be using a method from badge service, we're going to need to specify which service we're trying to use and which method from that service we're trying to use. So this is what it's going to look like. We're going to have our same signature, which is going to be local success error message. We're going to set this equal to pcall again, but this time, this is going to take in 2 parameters. So the first one is going to be the method of the class that we're trying to use, rather than our own function that we're trying to create. So we're trying to use an existing function. We're going to say badge service colon award badge, let's say in this case. We're not going to put in any open and close parentheses. We're just going to have it like this. And then our second argument is going to be the instance, also known as the service itself, that we're going to pass in. So it's going to just be badge service. We're going to pass in badge service. And then the rest are just additional arguments that we need to pass in. But in this case, we actually do need to pass in 2 arguments because we're trying to pass them into our award badge method, which, if you remember, award badge takes in 2 arguments, which the first one is the user ID and the second one is the badge ID. So in this case, we have to pass in our 2 parameters, which is going to be the player.user ID. But the thing is, we're not inside of our player added event. So we're actually going to copy this and we're going to paste this down here. So that's going to take in our first argument. The second one is going to be the badge ID. Because when we call award badge, we need to pass in the 2 arguments that need to be inside of award badge, which the first one's going to be the user ID and the second one's going to be the badge ID. And the second argument is just going to be the instance of the method that we're trying to use. Okay, so instead of using a colon, we're actually going to use a dot because award badge, in this case, we're just trying to get the method of the service. We're not trying to call it, because if we were to try and call it, we would use the colon with the open and close parentheses like this, but we're not going to do it like this. We just need the method itself. So that's why we're going to use a dot. And this is essentially the second way of how you write pcalls, and I hope this analogy made sense to you. Okay, but now let's go back and fix our already existing script to add pcalls to make it more safe. So I'm going to block out this comment that I have down here. And what we're going to do is copy what we had for our award badge pcall. And we're going to put this up here. So we're going to paste it over here. And we should have a success to tell us whether award badge has been successful. And so just to make this a little easier, we're going to comment out everything we've had here up until this point. So let's say this did not go through. Let's check if this was not successful for awarding the badge to the player. Then what we're going to do is print out the error message. So this is a more secure way of awarding the badge to the player, just so that we know that it is possible. Just so that we know that it is possible to get errors when it comes to awarding the badge to the player. So this is how you do it in a more secure way. Okay, but now let's say we wanted to further improve on this by checking whether the player already has the badge or not. So what we're going to do is say local has badge error message equals success has badge equals pcall open and close parentheses. What we're going to do is use the user has badge async that we had down here as our first argument. So we're just going to say badge service dot user has badge async. And then our second argument is going to be badge service itself. And then we're going to pass in our two arguments that are required for user has badge async, which is going to be the player.user ID and then finally the badge ID. And so now that we have that, let's check if this wasn't successful. So we're going to say if not success, then we're just going to print out some error message saying that that we failed to check if the player has the badge. So we're going to say failed to check if player has badge. Okay, and then what we're going to do is drop down here and say if has badge. So if the player actually does have badge, since user has badge async will return whether the user has the badge or not, we're going to take our original pcall with awarding the badge and we're going to put this inside of our has badge if statement. So already, now what we've done is checked if the player has the badge or not in a more successful way, and if they do, then we're going to securely award the badge to them. And finally, we're going to get the badge info in a more secured way, and this is what we're actually going to do to check whether we can actually award this badge or not. So here's what we're going to do. At the very beginning, we're going to get the badge information. So we're going to say local success to check whether this was successful again. But then this time we're going to say badge info equals pcall, open and close parentheses. We're going to write our pcall the second way, just like we've done every other time. So we're going to say badge service dot get badge info async. And then our second argument is just going to be badge service again. And then this time get badge info async only takes in one argument, which is just the badge ID. So that's what we're going to put down here. So what we're going to do is we can check whether this was successful or not successful. But in this case, what we're going to do is check if this was not successful. Then we're going to say if not success, then we're going to print failed to get badge information. Okay, and so now that we have this check for whether we weren't able to obtain the badge, and this check whether the player already has the badge, now we can finally go down here to actually award the badge to the player. Now, here's another thing we can do to make sure that we can actually award the player the badge now that we have our badge info, is if you remember, we can check whether this badge is enabled. So we can actually make that check down here before we award the badge to the player. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if has badge and badge info dot is enabled, then we're going to attempt to award the badge to the player. And so finally, we've reached the end of our script in the most secure way possible, at least to the way that I see it. So this has basically been adding badges in Roblox Studio, but of course you can experiment around with this and try to add even more badges if you were to loop all these around in a table to try and award specific badges to specific players if you decided to do so. This is generally the way that we script badges in Roblox Studio, and I want you to get into the practice of writing these pcalls to make them more secure when you're trying to add them. So that is basically going to be it for badges, and I hope you found this video to be helpful. If you're still confused about pcalls, I have another video where I go into pcalls in my data store video, which I'm going to have a link for you right here to watch if you're interested. But with that being said, be sure to check out the rest of my playlist for my advanced scripting tutorial guide, and I will be seeing you in the next episode. Take care.